Hello everyone, and welcome to Mackinac Island for UP Wild's meditative nature walk. We are on a very historic island. It actually has the second oldest national park right in the middle, and we're going to take you through the heart of it on our walk today. Before we begin, I'd like to just have everyone say hello. Like I said, I'm Lanny with UP Wild. If you want to say hello in the chat box right now, if you're watching live, maybe where you're from and the ancestral territory if you know it, or the watershed if you know it, anything else you want to share about where you're watching from, say it right now in the chat box. Even if you're not watching live, go ahead and say hi, because we kind of go back to the videos and we get to see who's watching from all over and create a sense of community together as we take these walks, since we're not doing it in person right now. So as we begin this walk that I'm going to take you through, know that I'm going to share some history with you of this area, because I don't think you can come to a lot of these beautiful nature spots without really acknowledging like where you are. That's the fun thing about being able to do these hikes, is that we can talk about them as we're walking. So we'll share some history with you in the beginning as we take this walk. And we'll have some other voices throughout, and hopefully your voice. So go ahead and comment on anything that you'd like to share. But let's begin our meditative nature walk through the very unique, very historical Mackinac Island, which I just want to note is situated on Lake Huron, in between northern and lower Michigan. So let's begin. Mackinac Island is situated near the Straits of Mackinac, between Michigan's upper and lower peninsulas, and is accessed by ferry connections in St. Ignace and Mackinac City. Automobiles are banned, and horses, buggies, and bicycles are used for transport. Mackinac Island of the 21st century is known as a vacation destination, and many of the voices that you're going to hear on our walk, including my own, have discovered its beauty by way of visiting it for a few special days. But Mackinac Island maintains deep roots in its past, most of which is told beginning about 400 years ago, when French explorers were venturing westward toward the upper Great Lakes. Soon after, fur trading propelled economic gain, which saw the creation of military forts, and war found its way to the island. As the military and economic significance of Fort Mackinac began to wane by the later half of the 19th century, Victorian cottages began sprouting up. As more vacationers arrived, entrepreneurs worked to make Mackinac Island synonymous with fudge, which is not something I am making up. That's on the tourism website. There is, however, another history to this island that usually goes untold, and we wouldn't be Wild Church if we didn't acknowledge it. So let's begin our journey by first doing what one must to get there, if not a fish or a bird: catch a ferry over.
Hi, this is Stacy Petke, just calling to share some thoughts about Mackinac Island. I grew up near Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and in my 40-something years, have never been to Mackinac Island until a year ago in October. That was my first experience, and taking the corner into the docks when we were taking the ferry over was just amazing to me. To think that you're going to an island that is so historical, has so much character, and is so set apart from our crazy, busy lives. In a world that seems to value busyness, I could see this being a beautiful place to live. I know being set apart like that is very different from what I'm used to living. Having grown up in the country, though, it just seems miraculous that there's still something so pretty much untouched like that in our world anymore. I enjoy the history of the island and the beauty. I think the history just reminds you of how far our world has come in the years. From the island seeing war to seeing peacetime. I love being along the water, just the relaxing sound of the water rushing up, or just the water being still, and being able to see, the world kind of passing by with ships and barges going by, some pleasure boats coming by, dropping people off to come and see the island.
Mackinac Island has been a special place for me ever since I was a little girl. I remember getting off the ferry and the excitement of walking into the busy downtown. And I think as a child, it was the shops and it was the fudge and it was the busyness and all of the tourists. But as I've gotten older, I'm more drawn to the trails and the walk along the water, and that rich history that I've gotten to know more and more of.
This summer, I had an opportunity to take my 22-year-old daughter with me to Mackinac Island, and she really wanted to ride the bikes around the island. But to see the island through her eyes was just amazing because she had just as big a love for it as I did. But we did rent some bicycles, and we jumped on the path around the island, which was technically closed, and took a bike ride. And that will be forever one of the most memorable things, because I can't remember the last time I rode a bike that long or that far. And now I understand what 8.6 stickers mean. It's the distance around the island if you bike the path. So thank you for letting me share my story and my love for Mackinac Island.
This watchtower here sits high on this island. This watchtower that used to be just a watchtower for some fort and some army that set itself up here to watch out for the enemy. The world tells us we don't need to watch. That is, spiritually speaking, the entrance halls to our soul, which are the senses. But spiritually, you all have a watchtower. It's in the heart, or rather, it's at the lotus, the eye of the heart. And at the watchtower, you're to sit up high. High to where you can see out. Where you can see all that wants to come up and in to your dwelling place, your temple, your fort, and your senses are how they get in. Just like the various paths that lead up to this place is how you would get in. But see, when you're in your watchtower, when you're seated at that high place, see who and what can come in and disturb your spiritual slumber, or your spiritual stillness, your rest. When we look out with our spiritual eye, we can see things as they are. God's creation, both visible and invisible. And in the meantime, say thank you for being given these eyes spiritually and physically. God has equipped you with everything you need to do battle and find peace, even in this life.
Hi, Lanny. It's Jane. You asked me about Mackinac Island. Well, when I think about being on Mackinac Island, I think about getting lost on purpose. My preference is to leave the commercial downtown area behind because it reminds me of sugar coating on top of something that's already naturally sweet. When I hop off the ferry, my first goal is to get on my bike and ride up to the top of the island and into the woods and again, get lost. Depending on the direction, there's a good amount of standing up and pumping the pedals to get to the top. Or, and it can be scary, a speedy coast down the hill. I have to give it all of my attention. There's a fine network of hiking trails there where you can see wildflowers and a variety of birds and not run into other people. When people can be seen or heard, though, their presence seems less intrusive somehow. There's a kind of awe that people seem to experience there on Mackinac Island. I think it begins with the lack of cars and the compelling presence of the horses. Between the novelty and the sights and sounds of the horses and their carriages and their drays, I myself feel called to slow down and to notice more things and admire these beautiful and noble creatures. Boy, do I love those horses. I must say I can't talk about my reverence for the island without saying that it's important to be mindful when I'm there, that it was a home to Indigenous peoples who came long before the French or the English appeared on the scene. And sadly, their history and their stories, multiple stories, are often drowned out by more recent history of the colonizer. While alone in the woods, I offer my gratitude to those who came before me and understood the sacredness of the place. I like to think they set an example for me, so I whisper my prayers and thanksgiving there among the trees and the spirits there.
A couple of years ago, we took a group of kids out to Mackinac Island and we invited the historian from the Little Traverse Bay bands of Odawa Indians to talk to us. His name's Eric Hemingway. And, you know, he shared a lot with us about the sacred places, and he showed us the markers that have gone up around the island that anyone can bike around and see, and they mark some of the spaces and tell some of the history, and I think that's been a great addition to the island. They describe Native American history and trade and burial grounds and a lot of what happened through the eyes of the original peoples. About 20% of Mackinac Island's year-round residents are identified as Indigenous people. A lot of times we get stuck in the 1800s and left there in terms of Native Americans, but the Ojibwe and Odawa are still living in the Straits and have fought and struggled for many years versus folks who have tried to remove them from that land and taken away fishing rights and water rights. And so these people are resilient and are faithful and care deeply for the beautiful land that is Mackinac Island.
try to move towards that reconnection between our worship of God, our faithfulness to God, and our care for our human and also especially our non-human neighbors, our place. And when we do that, we're also, even if unknowingly, walking in the steps of our indigenous neighbors. We are repenting of the way of life that those first kind of white settlers and miners and speculators pursued that used the land often as not extractively. But their approach to the land, how they treated the land and the earth, the specific place, is tied up with their treatment of the land's first human inhabitants and caretakers, the indigenous nations, whom they drove out. So we can't repent of the one without also naming and uncovering and turning away from the other. We can't turn away from a way of life that abuses the earth without also turning away from the abuse of those who loved and who still do love that specific part of earth.
So, as the snow begins to fall and we conclude our meditative nature walk through Mackinac Island, also known as Great Turtle to Native American tribes in the Great Lakes, I'd like to offer this reflection from my own experience. This was my 4th time here, but my first time seeing it through a UP Wild lens, meaning walking the land not as my rightful inheritance, but as one seeking to be true to my scriptural and spiritual inheritance of right relationship with Creator and creation. And this means looking beyond the past 400 years to see the past 1,000 and million years of the island's history. If we believe in a God who created all things, then how can we not have respect for its waterways, rock formations, and inhabitants who had a living relationship of care for this place? For after all, that is the same path we are called to walk as Christians, to not just be partakers in its beauty, but active in its healing, for the sake of the next generations to come.